Back in the day, baseball games used to be a dime a dozen, with every company having their own spin on things when it came to Major League Baseball games. Of course, nowadays there's only really one main contender, that being the MLB The Show series, which has been exclusive to PlayStation consoles. Now, while that series is going multi-platform soon, if you're a NintendoSwitch owner looking for a realistic baseball experience, you've pretty much been stuck with the RBI Baseball series. For some reason, even though I'm a pretty casual baseball fan, I reviewed all of the games in the series thus far for the NintendoSwitch. RBI Baseball 17 was pretty crappy, but I gave it somewhat of a pass as it was one of the first baseball games for the NintendoSwitch. RBI Baseball 18 and 19 also came to the NintendoSwitch, and while some things did improve, the actual quality of the baseball was, just very lacking in terms of it actually being a good baseball game. Now, RBI Baseball 20 has promised numerous improvements to, pretty much everything the core game has to offer, but did they succeed in doing this, or is RBI Baseball 20 yet another Strikeout? What's going on, guys? I'm RGT85. If this is your first time on the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button. But without any further ado, let's get into the nitty-gritty of RBI Baseball 20 for the NintendoSwitch and see if it's a decent baseball game this time around or yet another Strikeout. So when you start up the game, of course, there are numerous different game modes for you to check out. The first one being, of course, Exhibition. If you just want to hop into a basic baseball game and just play a little baseball, you would, of course, choose the Exhibition mode. There's also the Home Run Derby mode, which has you competing in a contest with other computer-based characters or even characters that are in local multiplayer and just trying to hit the most home runs in the allotted amount of time. You have the Postseason Mode, which lets you hop right into the postseason of the MLB season and, of course, try to win the World Series. And then there's Franchise Mode, and they've actually done some decent improvements to the Franchise Mode over last year's game. You can now do things like save your game in mid-game. If you don't want to finish the game and you have something else to do, you can simply save it and pick up the game and start it up at another time. You can adjust your injury levels to none, semi-realistic, or realistic so that players might be out for a few days or a few weeks depending on the severity of the injury. And also trades are like this as well, where you can allow them to be done no matter what, you're met with some scrutiny, or you actually have to make good trades that the other general manager of the franchise team would actually see a benefit in having these players brought over to their team. It's actually pretty decent. I do have one minor quibble. It would have been nice if you could have simulated a game till the end once starting the game, but the only simulation aspect you can do is at the start of the game and choose to simulate the game because, who's going to play all 162 games in a season? When it comes to players and teams, of course, all of the teams are available in this game. There's also a Legends team, there's All-Star teams as well, and there's kind of another team that's just sort of random older players. I don't really know why they threw that in there, but hey, they did throw that in there. All of the baseball stadiums and all of the players are also represented in the game as well, all with unique stats and of course stat tracking, and the game does offer free online roster updates should any trades happen whenever the MLB season for 2020 actually starts. Now, like I said, they did do some major improvements for core gameplay elements of this game, one of those being in the pitching system. Now, in previous years, the pitching was just an absolute joke. You couldn't do anything as far as picking which sort of pitch you want. You would simply hit the button, and then after you release the pitch, you would use the analog stick to kind of move it around, and it really just didn't work. But RBI Baseball 20 has a lot of improvements to the pitching system. Now all of the pitches are based on a pitcher's repertoire of pitches, meaning that you can actually choose which pitch you want to throw, such as a curveball or a knuckleball if that is what one of your pitchers is throwing. You basically choose a pitch from the dial menu, and there are two different meters on this dial menu. There's a confidence and a quality meter. The higher the confidence and quality are on the pitch, the more control you have over the pitch that you have selected. You can also place the pitch along with the velocity of the pitch by holding down the button longer. That's where the meters come into play, as less confident and less quality pitches will be harder to place. Also, if you don't use a pitch for a while, say you're just using major curveballs and you're not using the pitcher's fastball, your confidence in that pitch will actually start to wane unless you start to use that pitch in the game. Of course, things like fatigue also play a role, and the game goes on those meters and will deplete it, thus making it harder to throw these pitches. So for instance, if you're throwing really good fastballs at the start of the game, it's not necessarily indicative of how the pitcher will be throwing it in the 6th or 7th inning due to the things like fatigue and stamina playing a role in this. However, things like confidence can actually sort of counteract that, so there's almost like a strategy element to it. There's actually a brand new camera angle as well for pitching, and honestly, I really liked it. It's sort of a throwback to other older baseball games, and I think it looks really nice, and it actually gives you a lot more control over your pitches as you're trying to place these pitches. Overall, the pitching system is vastly improved over previous years and actually makes pitching, dare I say it, somewhat fun in this game. Another area of improvement is the batting aspect of the game. Now, by holding down the B button, you build up a meter, and the higher that meter is, the more power your hit will have, but it makes it a bit harder to just do basic contact hits. You can also use the analog stick to aim the ball when you hit it as well. Lower power hits are of course good for contact. Higher power hits are good for hitting things like home runs, so it kind of depends on what sort of hitter you are using as to what sort of hit you will want to use in the game. They've also improved the fielding in the game as well, as you can actually control when you dive now. Yes, that was a thing in previous games, you could not control when you dove for the ball. Honestly, everything feels a bit tighter than in previous years when it comes to fielding, and once again, you feel like you have a bit more control about what's going on in the field. All of these three things together, the improved pitching, the improved batting, and the improved fielding, just makes for a tighter baseball experience, and it actually makes playing the games a bit more fun than in previous years. Another area that they improved in are the graphics. The character models look a hell of a lot better than they did last year, and they look a lot more like their real life counterparts, with things like their own individual hair, their own individual facial hair, and their faces as well. The animation looks a bit better for the most part, and ballparks look pretty decent as well. A few ballparks are missing a few things in the background, but for the most part everything looks very nice and clean. You can choose whether to play games during the daytime or the nighttime, so each park has its own day and night cycle, and the game looks really good in handheld mode as well. Pretty much what you're seeing here on the screen is indicative of what you will see on handheld mode, and I was actually pretty impressed with just how good handheld mode looked. So far so good. Everything seems to have been improved. The pitching is a hell of a lot better, and it's actually fun to pitch. The batting has been improved, the fielding has been improved, the graphics have been improved. So it looks like RBI Baseball is a surefire home run, right? Well, no, the game still definitely has some fundamental problems, and even some new problems that arise from these new mechanics. So let's go ahead and get into the downsides of the game and go back to that new batting system. Now, I like the new batting system for the most part, but there is one major issue that arises because of the meter that you're using, and that's the fact that there's no check swing. You see, when you hold the button down, you can actually hold the button down to not swing at all if the pitch looks ugly, but sometimes you're not really sure, so you might want to check swing. What's weird to me is I feel like you could have still had this batting mechanic where you hold down the button to adjust your power, but if you wanted to check swing, maybe you just tap the button as well. So there is no check swing in the game, and that really makes it just very strange. Another thing I noticed is if you wanted to do a lot of low power hits, sometimes the game wouldn't register you holding down the button at all, and you just end up not swinging. Another issue I have with the NintendoSwitch version of the game that is just specific to the NintendoSwitch version of the game is that there's no online mode. Every other version of this game has online baseball, where you can play against another person. Yet once again, the NintendoSwitch version of the game doesn't have any online gameplay. Now, the Switch version of the game is the exact same price as all the other versions of the game, coming in at $29.99. So why is this feature cut from the Nintendo Switch version of the game, but it's available in every other version of the game? And finally, we have the presentation of the game, which is something that I've harped on for years and years with this series, because the presentation has just been very, very low quality. And while some things have improved in the presentation, for the most part, well, they really haven't improved. Once again, there is no announcer team for RBI Baseball 20. You hear a stadium announcer from time to time, you can hear the umpire as well, but there's no one actually calling the game of baseball, which is just bizarre to me because World Series Baseball on the Sega Genesis, which came out in 93, 94, actually had an announcer in the game. There's also still no instant replay, so if you wanted to watch it play back, you can't do that. You want to watch that home run again? Well, you can't do that. And it's just like, why? I feel like every baseball game since the start of time has had an instant replay feature, yet this game still does not have an instant replay. And yes, the graphics and animations are improved for the most part, but you still come across a lot of weird animations from time to time that just absolutely make no sense. I've had a situation where two players just kind of run into each other and then the ball just magically morphs to one of them, and then you try to throw it to the base, but the base runner has already gotten there in time. It doesn't happen all that often, but when it does happen, it definitely takes you out of the game, as baseball is basically a game where you're very meticulous. You're trying to do plays in the best way possible, because one simple play can end up transforming the whole game. So when you have these little glitches and these little hiccups, you definitely notice them. The parks themselves look good, but they honestly just feel very empty and lifeless. There's not really many crowd roars or crowd chants or anything that happens. The music in between innings is very loud as well, and I adjusted it and tried to lower it, and it was still overpowering all the other audio in the game, which I'm not really a fan of the music in the game, so I didn't really like it. And the final thing is, the loading screens seem to take forever in this game. I'm not quite sure why that is, but it feels like it might even be longer in handheld mode than it is in dock mode as well. So overall, how do I feel about RBI Baseball 20 at the end of the day? Well, it is a $30 baseball game, so I do have to give it some sort of leeway, as this isn't a full $60 title like the MLB The Show series is. Now honestly, I feel like they have improved on some major things. The pitching and the batting, for the most part, is a hell of a lot better than it was in previous year's entries. The pitching is actually a lot of fun, and you have a lot of control over what you do within the pitching. I feel like if the batting would have had a check swing, they would have hit another home run with that as well. It's not quite as in-depth as the pitching is, but I do feel like it suffices. The fielding has improved over previous year's entries, but unfortunately there are some weird animations that do happen from time to time that just sort of take over what you're trying to do on the field, and it just makes it for a bit of a spotty experience. I think RBI Baseball 20 is an improved experience over RBI Baseball 19. They actually did try, and if they actually boosted up the presentation values to what the gameplay values have increased to with RBI Baseball 20, I think this could have been a really good game. As it stands now though, it's definitely very average. If you're looking for a realistic baseball experience on the Nintendo Switch, I feel like you won't be super disappointed in this game. Of course, it is the only baseball game in town, but they did do some strides to make this game a more playable experience. Alright, so those are my thoughts on RBI Baseball 20 for the Nintendo Switch. Obviously, they did improve some things. I do have to give them credit for it, but at the end of the day, it's still a very mediocre experience just because of things like the lack of presentation values and some questionable animations that sort of overrule what you are actually doing on the field. If they could tighten that sort of stuff up, I think RBI Baseball 21 could actually be a good game. I know, I can't believe I said that either. So let me know in the comments section down below what you think of RBI Baseball 20. Have you played previous entries in the series? And if you did, how much did you hate them? And are you planning on picking up RBI Baseball 20 on the Nintendo Switch or on other platforms? And as always guys, thank you for checking out this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Be sure to check out other videos on the channel, and as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.